on to the next session for the afternoon. We're going to hear about enabling placemaking a bit later on. I've got three brilliant speakers who are going to talk to you about three Heartland projects where transport investment's really going to start unlocking opportunity. That's going to close out the afternoon pretty much. But before that, we're going to really get stuck into the whole issue of delivering for and with social inclusivity. We're going to hear perspectives from Heartland's delivery partners in particular. Four of the partners that are around the room are actually going to come here and actually give you examples of the way they're thinking within their organisations about changing the way they do business and the way Heartland's transport strategy is delivered. So, three presentations, pretty short presentations, then we're going to have a bit of a conversation, a bit of a chat. I've got some questions for them, and if you've got questions, stick your hand up, I'll get the microphone over to you, and we'll go from there. So, let's make a start. David Short. Welcome, David. David is with local highways at Kier Highways, and he's going to talk to us about social value and the kind of things that Kier is doing to deliver social value. It was going to be James Birch. Unfortunately, James is unwell, so thank you very much, David, for dropping in.
Pleasure.
All yours.
You. So, as said, I'm not James, so I'm standing in. James is unwell, but nothing COVID related, but you definitely wouldn't want him to be here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in Kier with regards to social value. So it's a little bit of a corporate pitch, but I'll get that out of the way really quickly. Secondly, a little bit about how we're doing it, and thirdly, about why we're doing it. So for those of you who have worked with Kier or working with Kier over the last few years, we've undergone a few challenges, and we've come out the other side, and we have what's called these critical success factors, and there's lots going on that slide, but really it's about our corporate strategy. So our corporate strategy is about being a national business with a local focus. Our job is about making sure that it's easier for our clients and our partners to leverage the whole of Kier. So Kier started life as a regional builder and then went and acquired various different companies along the way, and which means bringing all those services to bear can be a challenge. Now it's much easier, and I think we're able to do that. The most important thing that we have to do locally, though, is develop those local partnerships with people. So I'll give some examples of what we're doing. So we are working with HMP the Mount locally, and we're offering interviews, over 12 interviews for people near the end of their sentence. We're working through Kickstart, both through our Nordis, which is a supported sign-making facility in Northampton, and through our waste management teams, so making full advantage of that Kickstart programme. And finally, we are working with MENCAP to develop sort of supported internships in Northamptonshire. Why are we doing it? So there's the stuff about giving something back, but really it's about it's not selfish, but it's the reason we have to do it. If we don't, we won't have the skills, we won't have the ability to deliver for our clients going forward. There's lots of stuff going on that slide. I would draw your attention to that top right. So disability competent leader. We're very proud that we are the first organisation, first construction engineering organisation to achieve that status. Part of being that leadership scheme is promoting the scheme. So our call to action is come and see me at the stand. I'll tell you all about how it is and what value it adds to your organisation. Also, if people want to come and see the Nordis in operation, I say it's in Northampton, please come and see us and we can organise that visit. So, so like I say, there's lots of stuff on this slide. It's very difficult to do slides from someone else who's prepared and stepping at the last minute, so apologies if I rush through. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Before you rush off, though, wait, don't let me stop the applause. Goodness me. Before you rush off, one of the things we talked about quite earlier on was breaking down silos within local authorities, within regions. And I suppose, Kier, you're a multidisciplinary organisation. You do work across these silos. How do you think that the Heartland and all of its partners and its stakeholders should help to break down these silos to give a better service to the customer?
Well, within Kier and all the delivery partners will have lots of customer touch points. So we have lots of these engagement touch points. I think, and as part of that, we will be gathering lots of customer data. I think the next challenge for us, working together with our partners, is how do we make best use of that customer data to make really sort of like customer-driven decisions on transport strategy and asset delivery and all those other areas. So adding that customer-rich layer of data to all the other sort of like data that we collect as an industry.
So it's helping the Heartland to actually use their data better, and so they have a better understanding of
Absolutely.
What,
So demographic data that we touched on earlier, but actually things like customer focus groups, and which people are delivering and collecting through their day-to-day operations, but then how can we add that data layer to throughout the rich layer of data that we already have to make those proper decisions. So, yeah.
David, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come back to you in a moment with some more questions, but right now, do take a seat. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we're going to move rapidly on now to our next area of interest, which is, again, we talked about it earlier when Naomi was speaking. It's about the need to really boost equality across the region. And let me introduce our next speaker, which is Sharon Frances and Katie Pearce from Jacobs.
Thank you. We're really excited to be here today to chat a little bit about the work that we're doing in Jacobs around inclusive travel, and in particular, how better understanding the diverse needs of people that are using the transport network can help us better achieve our strategic aims and objectives.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm Sharon Frances, and I think the key takeaways from our presentation is how we can start using these into the transport appraisal process and help deliver the 5-point step plan for EEH. So moving on to the next slide. Sorry, one more, thank you. Yes, so this is a graphic we pulled together about 2 years ago where we started looking at this topic. So this is a bit of an exaggerated graphic, but we were trying to bring the point about how the current transport network more or less caters to certain groups, certain demographic groups, much more easily and flexibly compared to another set of groups. So we'll be quickly taking you through these 4 age groups because we've looked at it as a novel approach of looking at a lifetime approach for different people at the different stages of their life and how their different needs for accessing the transport network changes. So I'll quickly start off with the early stages and early ages of your life. So we've looked at a lot of data sets and we've realized that a lot of the transport behaviors are set quite early in the stage, and especially we're looking at 11-year-olds. So the cycling gap difference between, say, young boys and young girls start when you're 11. So it just kind of shows the importance of how cyclability schemes, cycle to school, has big impact. So when we are looking at constrained budgets and investment, can we start targeting towards these specific age groups so that we can start setting these travel behaviors going forward?
Absolutely. When we then move on to the young adults age group, this is where we really started to see personal security concerns coming into play. So even though men were more likely to be victims of crime on the transport network, women were more likely to report feeling afraid. And this constrains how they travel. So not only are some trips not taken due to personal security concerns, sometimes women are traveling in ways that may take slightly longer, they may be more expensive, or they may use modes that are perhaps not their first choice. I think this is actually a bit of an opportunity, because if we could start to address some of these personal security concerns, we could actually enhance some parts of the economy that we know are struggling to bounce back currently. So I know one question that one of our economists asked us was, if you can get more women traveling or feeling safe traveling at night, what would the economic impact of that be on the nighttime economy?
Yep, absolutely agree. And looking at the next age group, which is the caregiving ages, we've always assumed that caregiving ages would be, say, most people in the mid-30s, 40s, because that's often assumed to be caring for younger children. But we found that a lot of the caregiving trips are done between ages of 40 to 55, or even older, because caring for elderly parents, elderly relatives become a huge chunk of your trips that you do day in, day out. And a lot of that often disproportionately fall onto women to make those trips. So understanding how our transport networks are in place, so are we having enough circular routes rather than just everyone going into city centers for radial routes, which are more likely to be business and commuting trips? So are we catering to those trips? Are we catering to the time penalty as well as the expense penalty when you have to make 3 switches between different bus companies or different train companies? So that was another important thing we picked out from the caregiving ages.
And then finally, we've had some great presentations today, I think, around kind of social inclusion and especially around lack of access to car. And one age group that's particularly impacted by this is elderly people when they can no longer drive or maybe hold a driving license. And it's worth noting that even in this age group, there are some demographic differences in who's impacted by, say, lack of access to the bus network. Women tend to live longer than men, and they also, therefore, are more likely to spend at least part of their life with a disability. So when we're starting to make changes to the transport network, and especially to the public transport network, it's important to kind of consider more widely how the differences in the demographic makeup of groups can cause unequal impacts if we aren't aware of them.
So what we've done was consider these into how can we start implementing this in the business case and appraisal process? Because we recognize that there isn't a mandated need to collect demographic data, and also looking at around the room as well as around the transport industry, you're looking at a very low proportion of diverse workforce. So how can we start making sure that these diverse perspectives are considered when we are doing transport projects? So starting off, we recommend that we collect disaggregated data, and be gender demographic as well as perception data, which is quite important because we really don't know why people don't travel. We know things about people, why people travel or why they have difficulty in traveling, but what about those who don't make that trip at all? So it's important to understand perceptions of safety, perceptions of accessibility.
At the business case stage, I know that a few different people have maybe expressed frustrations with the fact that the ways that we sometimes write business cases and the stuff that has to be included can sometimes preclude really recognizing the social value and sometimes the environmental value as well of some of the schemes that we do. So I think there's an opportunity there to be bolder in terms of how we calculate benefits of schemes and to put forward new and novel ways of doing so.
And I think this is a whole field in itself where we're delivering inclusive designs. And I think we need to go beyond inclusive as somebody in a wheelchair. We need to consider safety, inclusion, people who might be scared based on different environments, just the waiting environment at a bus shelter, at a train station. Like, I wouldn't be waiting in certain environments because I know I would fear for my safety. So it's understanding inclusive design, not just, say, catering to your wheelchair user, but a bit beyond that.
And then finally, and I think this is where the role of STBs, local authorities, decision makers working together really comes into play, is that as an industry, I think we're not so great sometimes at sharing outcomes from projects and really looking into who is using the scheme, who is getting the benefits from it. And I think if we can get slightly better at collecting that data and also sharing it amongst ourselves as a community, that we can start to create really great projects moving forward as we take on those lessons learned. And then finally, I've got some project examples here of where we've started doing this in real life. Something I just want to quickly mention, I know we're running over, sorry, is that we've spoken about gender today, but this methodology can be applied to all sorts of different demographic groups. It's really important that we start to really understand the diverse needs of users and consider them in all of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just before you go, I mean, certainly the Heartland has got, one of its stated aims is really trying to address the extent that poor public transport really kind of perpetuates inequality. I mean, particularly in the deprived communities. I mean, to what extent, though, do you think that this kind of methodology you're using here, this kind of thinking, still is kind of a bit of a minority interest in the industry? Is that, well, clearly it's not around Jacobs, but in the rest of the industry, is it a minority interest?
So we've been doing this we've been researching this topic for about 3 years now, and the growth in the interest in this topic has been exponential. I think it is becoming more, it's on the radar for a lot of people. We're seeing a lot of objectives specifically around social inclusion, and you can see even here today we have a whole, portfolio of different speakers on the topic. So I think it's only going to get more important.
So yes, it's no longer seen as sort of a woolly kind of like cuddly sort of thing. It's a hard-edged business thing you're trying to do here.
Exactly.
Lorna Gribbin and Ludo, Pittie, Director of Landscaping from WSP. So tell us about streets as green landscaping. Over to you, Ludo.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ludo Pittie, and I'm delighted to introduce you to my colleague Lorna, who will tell you all about streets as green infrastructures. Over to you, Lorna.
Cool, thank you. So green streets. There are many benefits and uses to streets, and we're going to focus this talk on the benefits of making them greener, and to recognise that a street is more than just a conduit for cars, and strive towards creating a place which is healthier and greener for our communities. Now, healthy is green, and conversely green is healthy, so what makes a green street? So Green Street is actually a registered trademark name of a collaboration between West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Yorkshire West Local Nature Partnership. It was coined when the authority was developing policies and principles to be used in its future urban infrastructure. But for this presentation, we're using the definition as a streetscape which utilises both green and blue infrastructure to connect with wider networks. So green streets also offer benefits to the community, providing a space for people to meet, make the street their own, and ease social cohesion, and also accessibility, creating spaces for all residents, promoting public transport and encouraging active travel. And there are multiple benefits to green streets for people, society, the economy, and the environment. So firstly, for people, there's a range of evidence proving that we are intrinsically programmed to feel better in nature, and that this contact improves our physical and mental well-being. And green streets really encapsulates this idea that we can create a space for all, which is crucial with more of us moving into urban areas. For society, green infrastructure can promote community ownership and change behaviours to encourage taking pride in the local environment. So for example, community planting, or maintaining green spaces, or parklets. These are all positive influences to bring people together. And COVID has really highlighted that access to green space is so important, but it's also so uneven. And we can really use green infrastructure as a great tool to foster that community sense of belonging. For economy, green infrastructure has been shown to keep residents in their local area and so support their high street. And on a much wider note, it's a much more economic solution than grey infrastructure. And lastly, for the environment, green streets are a nature-based solution to tackle ongoing climate change by giving the city more resilience. Green and blue infrastructure can assist to manage stormwater events, reduce wind, cool the city, reduce the extent of atmospheric pollutants, and sustain biodiversity within urban areas, which has both biophilic benefits, but it's also crucial for climate change to provide a biodiverse, multicultural, fit-for-purpose framework of planting. So the next two slides are case studies demonstrating how we can achieve this. So firstly, we've been working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority on a number of green street projects. The images here are of options to convert a street in Harrogate. So the two slides show the hidden space within a standard street and how we can reclaim this to allow a range of mobility. The project adhered to Green Street principles as a process, which allowed a collaborative response and ended up with multiple benefits for society, the environment, and its users. And then scaling up to an entire corridor, we're working with the local authority to relieve existing and future pressure on the highway network and address the future mobility of the town and give the environment a more robust response to the future climate. So our innovative solution is to provide a green corridor with a sequence of gateways to connect into the town. The aerial and the sketch design here highlight, the scale of forgotten space, which is not fully utilized for society or for the environment. So the design now completely changes the character and functionality of the space. It provides a solution which brings together mobility requirements, as well as addressing the need for climate resilience, public realm, and open green space for the surrounding residential development. I'll just pass back over to Ludo.
Thank you, Lorna. So, as you would have seen, green-blue infrastructure have a key role to play in how we design and build our environments going forward. And that's why in writing Manual for Streets for its next edition for Department for Transport and CIHT, we are currently writing the green-blue infrastructure chapter and expanding on the National Model Design Code that says every street should have street trees to every street should have green-blue infrastructures. They provide essential benefits for us to move towards decarbonizing places, to create a green arc and move towards net zero streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, one quick point. One of the things which, I mean, in the years I've been writing about infrastructure, this issue of who maintains the green infrastructure in the public realm continues to be the kind of the barrier. I mean, is that barrier disappeared now? You know, have we basically just said, well, if you're going to have this, it's got to be privately developed, or are local authorities funding the money to and the way that they can actually manage this infrastructure?
I think there's a scale issue to start off with and a perception issue. So if you look at what's happened in New York and Copenhagen, they've invested at scale for green infrastructures for climate resilience. And in doing so, the amount of money spent through green infrastructure solution is 3 times less than through a grey engineering solution. So actually the long-term cost benefits are far greater using green-blue infrastructures. So a lot of it is down to that understanding, because actually in the long run it will be better for everyone to do with the green way. Okay,
well fortunately David's here from Kier, so I'm sure that he'll be able to put that to him directly. David, come and join us back up again. Come and join us, Sharon and Katie. Come and let's put some questions to you on this issue of how we're going to deliver for and with social inclusivity. I'm going to carry on with in this green issue there around, I mean, the juxtaposition, I suppose, and I'm going to the question that, that they raise there around, I suppose, removing road space, planting green infrastructure. But one of the things that you're talking about in your presentation was the need to enhance the access to public transport, access to transport. I mean, are the two at odds with each other when you're talking about social inclusion? Removing streets, removing traffic, and actually increasing the amount of transport options.
Sure. Well, when we look at communities that are normally underrepresented, both kind of in the sector and then also in kind of like longer distance travel, we see that actually a lot of underrepresented communities actually do walk and cycle more than, you know, using any other mode. So I think reallocating street space towards those modes and giving people more, you know, space to undertake those trips safely is actually conducive to being more inclusive rather than taking away from it.
Sharon, you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there is a bit of a misconception that sometimes when you start providing for certain groups, you're taking away things from other groups, and that's always a bit of a give and take, you know, battle between where your investment goes into. But I think to be able to make sure that we're inclusive as a whole, we need to make sure that a lot of these considerations that span across certain communities are taken into consideration when we start planning. And that is why we need to think about this way ahead. Like, we don't want to go down a path of like, let's see, we've chosen this scheme and now let's try and go ahead with it.
I suppose, David, that would be your, as the person who's there actually delivering the maintenance schemes and the delivery, coming in last minute with a solution isn't really where you need to be.
Well, no, we want to get involved really early, and I think that the concept of having the green street, I think we can extend that to actually the social infrastructure as well. So making sure that developments that we've got and all the local authorities have all got huge growth agendas, and making sure that we're building communities where they have that 15-minute environment, that they actually have the infrastructure built in that supports the community. So there's lots of ways that we can support that through modern methods of construction, making sure that within communities there are skills and opportunities built into those communities. Yep. So the last thing you want to see is gated communities reliant on car without the ability to access active travel and all those.
But you would recognise the challenge though as in your role as a highway maintainer, of finding enough resource to manage a green street, finding enough resource to manage that green intervention, as opposed to just simply sweeping a highway.
Well, it's about how we define the difference between a road and a street. So, so we've got the idea of a street that we've seen here today, and then the difference what we've talked about supporting the freight and the logistics and in terms of our roads. And I think, in my opinion, personal opinion, is that we need to address those differently in the way that we're specifying those roads and streets, and then making sure that we are getting the practical upfront from not just Kier, but certainly our specialist supply chain and the partners that we're working with universities and specialist suppliers, and lots of the startups that we're engaging with.
Okay. If you've got questions, let me know where you are, and I will bring them. Where's my microphone gone? It's somewhere around. Here it is. I'll come down there. Bring a microphone down to the front if you can, Andrew. Thanks. Can I just, though, before that, just tackle one other question, Ludo and Lorna, and everyone actually. How do you think, I mentioned it a bit earlier, how do you think that the Heartland and the local authorities here should really engage with the community and understand their needs? Because you put up these lovely pictures of streets being turned from road into lovely boulevards that people can wander, that will pedestrianised. And we've seen post-COVID a lot of footpaths being turned into sort of piazzas. And we've also heard a lot of communities complaining about the fact that these things have been turned into piazzas. So how do you make sure that as an organisation, as an authority, as a region, you're not just reacting to the needs of the people who shout the loudest? How do you actually get hold of the community interests, Lorna?
Well, yeah, Green Streets, I think it's a very collaborative process. So it isn't just the end product itself. The whole movement is a process of engaging every member of the community.
Well, how do you do that? How do you get every member of the community? Because there's a disenfranchised, there's people who they just don't want to talk to the local authority. You know, how do you get to the people that you can't normally they've got a view, but they're just not the ones that come forward?
It's a very good question.
We try to do is engage differently.
Sorry, so David, yeah, go on. Okay. David.
So what I would say is that it's a blend of different approaches. Yeah. So there's a great phrase that I heard the other day, which is digital is a gateway to inclusivity, and actually using some of those digital platforms helps the sort of people who are sort of the pro-change agenda, you might say, come forward and express their views, who sometimes they don't have the opportunity to do so. So it's a blend of traditional sort of focus group face-to-face along with some of that digital thing as well. So again, it's a blended approach.
Ludo, they shown.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's also adapting the way we engage and why we engage and when. So starting early before we even identify the scheme to actually influence what scheme is needed in the first place, rather than saying, we've got a scheme on this road, what do you think? So I think it's really rethinking entirely data and community and how we target investment.
Yeah, I think I'll just add that one of the things we've seen is a lot of opposition by certain people to low traffic neighborhoods. It was just kicking off when they came in certain areas. So I think that is primarily because some of the benefits and some of the messages were not clearly said to these communities when they were put forward, and also a lot of them were in place, and then they had a session where, okay, fine, let's discuss about this. So I think it's important to explain the benefits of it. I think it's coming back to the point of if each of us had an awareness of this is the carbon emission I personally am making, you know, like how we have the nutrition labels of green, red, amber. If we could have something like that for each and every scheme or each and every, project, then I think it'll just make people a lot more informed.
Yeah. And I imagine get the delivery right as well. Make sure that it's delivered properly rather than as an afterthought. You've got a question, far away.
Stephen Quinlan from Jacobs. I'm just thinking in terms of if we looked at the different groups as opposed to a kind of classic 9-to-5 commuting pattern, and we took those into appraisal and we could kind of get the benefits from that, what would future investment programs look like?
I'm happy to answer this one. So one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about inclusive travel is around how we appraise benefits. It seems crazy to me that the value of time for caregiving, which is worth billions to the economy, is sometimes given the same value in modelling as going to the cinema with your friends. So I think if we started to tweak some of those values, or maybe just weight things slightly differently, that we would probably see some projects kind of not necessarily fall back, but maybe new projects come forward. So we probably see lots more local kind of projects, I guess, coming forward around that 15-minute city idea, around, helping people make lots of maybe chain trips, doing lots of different activities in one go, and a bit less of a reliance on really long-distance commuting, which, a lot of funding is poured into at the moment. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but just that it will probably be enhanced by other projects.
Which is, I suppose, it's when you have a very obvious example like care versus going to the cinema, but there's a lot more nuance in that. I mean, if you were Naomi, how would you actually do that, David? How would you actually make that work? Because there's a lot of nuance in it.
I mean, for me, it's a great question, and probably I'd loathe to second guess the great British public. I've made that mistake a couple of times before, and I've lost both times. But I think it's a similar question that the Oxford bus operator had with sort of like say the investment that we make in our highway network versus the investment that we make in the bus infrastructure network. So the answer is I don't know what that appraisal might look like and what the program might look like.
Okay.
But it's
an interesting one. Yeah. Question here, far away. Yeah.
Andrew Ross from Global Garden. It's a question for Lorna. It's picking up on your comment about green corridors. And my question is, what is the scale on which you are looking at a green corridor? Because the Environment Agency has got the catchment area strategy, and there is biodiversity net gain now embedded into planning policy in the Environment Bill. And there is a colossal amount of money moving into green infrastructure at the landscape scale for flood resistance and resilience. How are you connecting this into the delivery of the streets?
Sure. The example we showed is a huge scale, but I think the idea of using the corridor as a wildlife value on many different scales. It's using the streets as a framework to hang green infrastructure on and connecting that into wider fragmented habitats. I don't know if you had anything to add.
So the corridor we looked at is probably about 1.5 kilometers, and it also has a number of new developments adjacent to it. So part of the idea was not just increasing capacity at the junctions, but actually moving away from the traditional model and say, well, we can encourage a different pattern of behavior as to how people living on that corridor can access the service and go into the center of the town. So it's not about removing vehicles, it's about reprioritizing whose space is it and who can actually best utilize it for what benefits, and actually boosting the net gain and providing funding alternatives to contribute towards delivery by accessing those other pots that you identified. So it's actually a new way to try to channel those different fundings.
Mm-hmm. And do you think you mentioned the biodiversity gain in the Environment Bill, which, is it a bill still, or is it an act now? It's a bill. Does that actually help to actually switch people's minds towards green infrastructure?
It starts with the leadership, so those projects started with leadership from local councillors who really wanted to bring that into action. So the first thing is alignment between the visions for those leaders, for their communities, and what we can bring to reality. And then it's about being able to translate and bring those elements together. So the net gain is definitely something we're going for like 30% on this corridor, because we know we can. It's aimed at those green infrastructures. Yeah. And actually it's a way, the next stage, so we're in a proof of concept stage for this. So the next stages are really about doing that community engagement to build the interest and the validity of the model, so that we can actually build it in the next 3-4 years and come back to you when it's built to actually showcase the benefits and what happens when it moves on a step further.
Sharon?
Yeah, because I was just thinking it influences a lot on how we present schemes for investment in our business case. Because if we can look at all the benefits that outweighs all of these costs, and if we can try and start monetizing this, we're looking at an immense potential. So maybe it's about maybe EH being a lot more bold and innovative of, this is how we're going to go ahead. We can value green infrastructure, we can value social value to be this much benefits that's just going to outweigh a lot of the costs. And I think that is a path we need to go down if we need to be bold.
And who knows, local authorities may use it as a money-making thing by selling the credits.
Well, they're certainly using it as a cost saving. Well, not cost saving, but there's double benefits. You're seeing lots of highway verges. Talk about scalability. The highway verge is a huge green asset, and lots of people now are wildflowering all of them and saving cost on grass cutting.
We're running out of time, but one final thing I wanted to talk about was skills, because it's delivering with and for social inclusivity, as we touched upon earlier, it's kind of a new and emerging thing. Do we have the skills? Do we have the talent coming into our businesses? I mean, clearly Jacobs has bought all the talent, and so has WSP. But do we have the talent there? But do we have the skills and the talent at the top also to make sure that we're making those decisions, David?
I think that we're slowly getting there and changing minds. For me, skills is a long-term project. It starts with hearts and minds in schools, educating parents, careers advisors, that highways and infrastructure is a viable career option, there's lots of work to go on there. I don't think we're going to see. I think short term we're going to see a challenge with skill shortages, and that's right the way from leadership through to professional services into actually delivery on the ground, including gritter drivers this winter.
Right.
And I think that I think it was going to be a challenge and something that I think the industry has taken a bit of a grasp on now.
Sharon,
I mean, I'd like to add that if we're thinking there's a shortage of people in the industry, we need to be thinking about who else are we missing. Are we asking the right questions of people with different backgrounds can come in and start being part of the industry? You don't really need to be an engineer, and you don't really need to be a geographer. You can, have experience in a lot of different elements, even digital innovation, and maybe that is what we need to be looking for, is our workforce being a lot more diverse, even not just, say, people, but skills and what background they came from.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're missing out people because we're not.
Well, yeah. As I
inviting
said at the top of the day, infrastructure is really important, but it's all about people at the end of the day. Lorna, have you got the right people coming through into your business?
Yeah, I think with landscape architects in particular, you have many different backgrounds. So people come from different types of environmental science and ecological backgrounds, and those skills are brought forwards into design and construction. From Ludo.
Yeah, I was just going to add, the landscape is actually one of the skills shortage that's recognized by the government, and that's why we're part of the apprenticeship pathway with the Landscape Institute to try to get the Secretary of State to sign off so we can get more opportunities for more people to join the profession, because we're going to be running short of how many people we need to help deliver the solutions we need for the next decade if we've got a chance at achieving what we need to achieve over the next 10 years.
Ludo, thank you very much. Thanks to Ludo and to Lorna, to David, to Sharon, and to Katie. Thank you very much. A round of applause. Thank you.